Well, he was looking for an amicable and fair exit, his words. And apparently amicable and fair means intending to file a lawsuit for more than $1 million. Former Democratic lawmaker, former Republican candidate for state superintendent, former employee of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and still apparently superintendent of the West Bonner County School District has filed a tort claim against the Idaho State Board of Education and the Idaho Department of Education. Durst is claiming because his emergency provisional certificate was denied by the State Board of Ed last September, he was no longer legally qualified to run a school district. And when I say still superintendent, maybe you're thinking, hold on a second, didn't that guy resign from his superintendent gig like months ago? Well, that's where things get a little muddy, because if you look at his Twitter bio, you can see that he still lists himself as the superintendent of West Bonner County. So is he still superintendent? I've tried to get an answer to that, but I couldn't get a confirmation or a denial to that question. Perhaps we now know why, pending legal issues. But as to see how we got to these legal issues, and we've talked about this before, in order for Durst to earn the title of superintendent, he would have to get an emergency provisional certificate, because Durst didn't qualify, didn't fulfill those requirements to be a superintendent based on Idaho code, specifically the 4 years of full-time certified employment in a school. And these provisional certificates, they're granted by the State Board of Education for 1 year to allow a district to hire a teacher who hasn't yet earned that required training to be a teacher, but maybe they're working on it, or they just need a teacher in an emergency. Well, Branden Durst was hired with that emergency plan in place until it wasn't.
I do not see a need for our district to declare a state of emergency at this time.
Let's pick up the saga on June 28th, when the West Bonner County School District Board of Trustees, with Branden Durst seated in the back room, approved his $110,000 a year contract to be the next superintendent. But his appointment was dependent on one thing: Durst being granted an emergency certificate.
From the research I have done, the superintendent candidate that was voted in is not currently qualified or able to fulfill all the duties of a public school superintendent, even with an emergency certification.
Despite that opposition from Trustee Barton, the emergency was declared 3-2.
You know, I think all those kind of factors kind of culminating together made this a little more difficult than it needed to be, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to doing good things for the district.
Now jump ahead to September 13th, when the district got this letter from the State Board of Education. According to Matt Freeman, the executive director, while reviewing Durst's application, they decided they couldn't do that, saying while they have done this in the past, a new legal review of Idaho code meant they could only grant emergency provisional certificates to teachers, not administrators. Therefore, Durst would not be able to meet the legal requirements to be superintendent. The next day, Durst responded on Twitter with this, calling the timing of the legal review particularly strange and a discriminatory act by a board run by those with a political axe to grind. His last line foretold where we are today. He said, "They will be held accountable for their discriminatory actions." 2 weeks later, on September 25th, Durst decided to call it quits, saying he faced a situation marked by relentless obstacles thrown his way. He also left his last day up to the board, which accepted his resignation in October.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And hired Joe Kren as interim superintendent. Okay, so this decision to deny Durst's emergency provisional certificate was backed up by an analysis by the state attorney general's office. In Durst's tort claim, he says his denial based on that interpretation. His denial was based on an interpretation, and the subsequent resignation from his job resulted in compensatory and punitive damages to himself, his loss of his six-figure salary, and professional, emotional, and reputational harm, he said, although some have argued he does damage to his reputation every day on social media. Should this tort become a lawsuit, Durst is asking for $1.25 million.